Today we're going to talk about Photoshop. Not all of Photoshop, just the fundamentals of Photoshop. So when you first open Photoshop, this is what you're going to see. Now I have a lot of extra stuff that I've worked on, so ignore everything that you see right there. So that's not even there. So first off, we're going to say to create new. So select this right here and then this will pop up. Now to make sure we're on the same page, select photo and make sure your settings look exactly like this. Alright, so as soon as you do that, say to create and this will pop up. This is your workspace. And if to make sure our workspaces look the same, select this up here, make sure Essentials is selected and then say to reset Essentials. After doing that, we're all on the same page. If you look to your left, you're going to see all of our tools, which we will get to here really soon. And if you look to the top right, you'll see our history, which is really important for going back and seeing what you've done. Below that are the document properties, which kind of give you just the overall information of the whole document. Below that, make sure you select adjustments, and these will pop up. These are a bunch of editing tools that you can use to edit your work in Photoshop. Below adjustments, you'll find layers. Layers get really complex, so we'll go ahead and talk about them in another tutorial. And on top of layers, you also have all these different tools for editing your layers, so we'll get to those later. Now we're at our moving tool, and our moving tool is actually really great. So first off, make sure it's selected, and then you can click and drag your work wherever you'd like. Or you can hold down the shift key and click and drag it from side to side or straight up and down. Alright, next up we have our Elliptical Marquee tool. And if you click and hold down on that, this will pop up. There's multiple different types of these marquee tools, but all of them have the same overall idea for how to use them. So if you click and drag any of them, you're going to select a certain area, and if you hit delete, it's completely clear. Or you can just edit that area individually. You can also click outside of where you're working, and you can fill that in with the paint bucket tool just by clicking on it, and you've made a shape. Now it's time to focus on our selection tools. First off, we're going to use our independent selection tools, but make sure that this is selected up here. So we're going to make sure our lasso tool is selected and make sure that's selected. If it's not selected, you can click and drag here, and if you want to add to it, you can start clicking and dragging, but it's going to lose what you've already selected. So if you select these two squares, you can make sure you can keep adding and adding and adding without losing any of what's been selected already, which is very helpful. You also have your quick selection tool, which if you select that and then if you click and drag on the photo, it will try editing for you and selecting a lot of that stuff for you. Only problem is this can be really tedious because it's not as good as your eye at catching the differences in between colors and really getting what you want. So let's try actually selecting something and using the tool for something. If you do not select something and you just try editing, it's going to adjust the whole photo. So let's just go after her eyes here. I'm going to use the lasso tool and I'm going to click and drag around her eyes. Let's get this one too over here. And then let's go to brightness and contrast. We'll up the brightness about there and then we'll really up the contrast. By doing that, I only edited her eyes and making her eyes really stand out in this photo. Next up, we have the crop tool. Crop tool is pretty self-explanatory. You select the crop tool and then you can click and drag, but keep in mind it doesn't only affect the photo, it affects the overall space. So we're going to click and drag on the photo just to get rid of that white background and hit enter, and there you go. Now it's time for us to use the eyedropper tool. So first off, let's make sure we select the paint bucket, and it's going to use this front color over here. So paint bucket is selected, and click on that, and then let's use this eyedropper tool. Let's get some of this black in here so we can match the background with her a little bit better. Click on the background, and there you go. Now she blends better with the background, and that's just a really quick way of understanding the eyedropper tool. Now let's move on to what's called the patch tool. Patch tool is really incredible. So let's select the patch tool, make sure that's selected, and then let's take away some of her eyebrow just to kind of show you the powers. So you're going to click and drag around the eyebrow just like this, select the selected part, and then drag it upward, and there you go, you kind of replaced her eyebrow. The paintbrush tool is pretty self-explanatory, so we move on to the clone stamp tool. So hold Option and click with the clone stamp tool selected, and then you can drag and just kind of show the photo in a whole nother location. It allows you to kind of duplicate the photo in multiple areas if you're interested. And you also have what's called the dodge tool, the burn tool, and the sponge tool. The dodge tool you can brighten, the burn tool you can darken, and the sponge tool will take away the color of the photo. And that is the fundamentals of Photoshop. And there are some tools we left out, but that's just because they'll be in other tutorials. Thank you.